And here we go. Whoa! Wow, wheel spin! What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is the 2022 GMC Hummer EV. So about the Hummer EV, well, you've probably seen all the headline stuff already. You know, it's got 1,000 horsepower, a 3-second 0 to 60 time, all kinds of crazy off-road toys with crab walk and the air suspension that can raise and lower itself, and all of the off-road capability this has, in addition to all the other toys like the front trunk, the removable roof. I mean, there is just a million things this thing has going on, and it's very exciting and very, very fun in so many different ways. It's on GM's Ultium platform, but in this it's unique where it has the battery double stacked, so you have this massive over 200 kilowatt hour battery in this thing to keep this thing rolling for up to 329 miles of EPA rated range. This thing is massive. It's over 5 inches wider than a Silverado, and the only thing that's wider than this is the Ram TRX by just like 1.5 inches or so. But I mean, this thing is enormous, it's massive, and it's also, all the mass is up really high too, so I mean, it just really looks chunky and just enormous, and it just dwarfs everything else. Even like your average 3-row crossover out there looks tiny compared to this thing. It's hilarious, the presence this thing has. And so I think they also did a great job on the styling of this as well. You know, I mean, it looks just like, you know, a Hummer should. It has, you know, the same traits with the grille there that harkens back to the old Hummer's grille, and it's instantly recognizable as a Hummer, which I think is a really hard thing to do these days, but you know, it's still so distinctive while still having all the futuristic stuff with the light bar in the front and all the cool LED accents, which are really sweet, especially when you're charging it, the way that they kind of add up with these little like tick marks almost with those blue lights. And of course, you know, all the off-road stuff shows that this thing means business as well, with those skid plates up front and these massive 35-inch tires you have here on the sides. And other things on the sides, I really love how flared out the fenders are. It's very boxy, and just the way that it's kind of scalloped out here in the front fenders and the rear quarters is really cool and gives this like a new wide body kind of look to it. You also have, you know, these chunky mirrors, and also you'll see that this is kind of a convertible. Technically, legally, it is not a convertible, but I mean, with those roof panels, you can take them off and have a basically convertible open air kind of experience. And then out back, you will see that this is a pickup truck. Now, there will be a normal SUV version of the Hummer coming next year as well, but in the meantime, we just have the truck version here, and it's a nice, useful bed. It's a 5-foot bed. I mean, it's not enormous, but that's pretty average with what you see with a lot of other, you know, pickup trucks these days, and it should be pretty usable. It has a bed liner there, and has all the other tricks that you're used to from other GMC trucks, like the split tailgate there, which has a little built-in step. You can even get speakers built into that lower step there if you'd like. This one doesn't have that, but you know, a really handy feature. And also, you know, you have power outlets, tie downs, lights, cameras to look into the bed, all that kind of stuff. There's even a roll-up tonneau cover there, and it does make this a pretty usable truck. Now, towing is only 7,500 pounds, payload is only 1,300 pounds, so I mean, the amount of truck things you can actually do with it are fairly limited. But the fact that you have that truck practicality and a pretty long bed, all things considered, I think, you know, makes this very practical even for those who do light trucking kind of activities with these. You know, you'll be able to do that pretty well. And so overall, I mean, it's just, this thing just stands out like crazy. It's so exciting to look at. It's just so fun, and it just impresses every single person that sees it. All right, so let's turn it on and go for a drive. The Hummer EV has a unique key here. It still has the GMC badging, but you have the Hummer EV thing there at the top. And overall, you know, I mean, it's plastic. In a vehicle this expensive, it'd be nice to have a key that's a little bit more expensive feeling, but not a big deal. And of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the power button, and it turns right on. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Hummer EV, my wife and I just did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle where we go over every single cubby, every single feature of the infotainment system. We go through all that stuff in depth, so I'll link that video above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. Overall, though, it's very unique and exciting and special feeling in here, but it doesn't feel particularly expensive. Again, considering this vehicle's as tested price is $110,000. Some of the metal looking stuff you're seeing here is actually plastic, and there's a lot more plastic in here than I was expecting. And so, I mean, they're supposed to, you know, make this rugged and durable for the off-road aspect, and I totally get that. But, you know, it just would be nice to see a luxurious version of this that actually has luxury touches, you know, that goes along with this price tag for those who do want something that, you know, is a little more luxurious feeling than this. But overall, still a very special interior, and definitely check out that video for all the details. All right, so setting off here in the Hummer EV. So the first thing you notice about this? Well, obviously you're sitting up super high. You also have these very rectangular little windows. The windshield's tiny, and you have a very good view because you're sitting up so high and stuff. But it's just, if you're used to any of the old Hummers, you'll feel right at home in this with the way that it feels with the view out. Now, it still has excellent visibility, and also it helps it feel a little more airy whenever you have these transparent roof panels. That makes it a lot more airy. And also, like, the B pillars, A pillars are all pretty thin as well. View out of the back is also great because you have a camera rear view mirror there, so you'll always have a great view. But other things to notice here. So if you're very quiet, you'll notice it does make these little, fake sounds to make it feel a little more futuristic and stuff. Unfortunately, they're too quiet. I actually like the way they sound, but I mean, they're very, very quiet. I wish you could amp them up or, make them a little more prominent than what they are. Other things about the Hummer EV. Well, the first thing that jumped out at me after all the visibility stuff is the steering. The steering is very loose. I would say it's pretty similar to a Wrangler, the current generation Wrangler, if you're used to that. So that means it's not very precise. I mean, it's obviously, this thing is enormous and there's a lot of wiggle built in, and you can't have super quick steering in something like this, just for rollover reasons. So I mean, I get that they had to keep it more relaxed, and that is better for off-roading as well, which is what this is built for. It just means that on the road it's not precise steering at all, and that's okay. It's just something you have to get used to as you're driving this around. But since my reviews typically focus on what it's like to daily drive these kinds of vehicles, that's just one thing to notice is the steering. I mean, I can go like this, and I mean, it's barely wiggling, so it's, it's not very sharp, but that's okay. Other things here, throttle response. I was actually surprised because, this thing is 1,000 horsepower. I'm like, oh man, I gotta be careful with the gas pedal because it's gonna want to take off on me. Not the case. The gas tuning, the throttle tuning is very relaxed so that you can make big motions with your foot and it doesn't do a whole lot. So you really have to be deliberate and put your whole foot into, flooring this thing whenever you want to actually, get it moving. And so it's more travel than I'm used to from a throttle. Also, brakes, thankfully, feel pretty good. They start to bite right towards the top of the pedal, and they do feel fairly meaty at low speeds. Once you get up to even some higher speeds, like I was even just slowly driving around yesterday, and I had to kind of do a little bit of a quick panic stop to make a red light in time, and it didn't impart a ton of confidence. This thing is about 9,000 pounds, a little more or a little less depending on how it's configured, but at 9,000 pounds, I mean, even the world's largest brakes on a production vehicle wouldn't be enough to make this thing feel like it's stopping super fast. But these brakes, I just wish there was a little bit more to them. We'll test them out a little bit more here as well. But there is no kind of sport mode or anything aside from the watts to freedom mode, which is a launch mode that this has. Unfortunately, the launch mode, it has to lower the suspension and prime the battery and everything. So it takes a little more prep. You can't just hit the button and quickly do it on a public road. You need to be somewhere where there's no one behind you, no one around in order to do it. So hopefully at some point this week, I'll find a place where I can safely do the watts to freedom. But I'm going to do my usual acceleration, which is about 5 mile per hour rolling acceleration here. Let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. All right. Wow, it still picks up nicely. And wow, it's interesting. So unlike some other electric vehicles, as you get to higher speeds, it starts to pull like harder and harder. It's very interesting of the way that's set up. So anyway, yeah, and wow. And whenever you put your foot down, it really lifts up the nose so much because of how soft the suspension is here. And again, with that building acceleration G, it really gets more and more exciting the longer you put your foot into it, which is the polar opposite of most other EVs. And it's a welcome change, so it's a lot of fun. So anyway, whenever you don't have that watts of freedom mode going, you're going to have 830 horsepower, but it's the full 1,000 horsepower in that mode. You also have 1,200 pound-feet of torque, and in that watts of freedom mode, you'll get a 3-second 0 to 60 time. But Car and Driver did test a 5 to 60 rolling acceleration, and in that setting, you're going to be doing about a 4.9 seconds 0 to 60, which is most likely kind of like what I experienced there. It wasn't a mind-blowing 3 seconds 0 to 60 run, and under 5 seconds is still a impressive quick time, especially for something as enormous as this is, that's really not focused on acceleration at all, honestly. So it's impressive, but if you're just rolling around with your buddies and you floor it, it might not elicit the same kind of crazy reactions you'd get out of know, someone whenever you're driving a Tesla Plaid or, you know, any other wide variety of EVs that have that instant punch and, you know, a huge amount of pull even without that mode. This is definitely still going to be funny that it's going as fast as it is, but it's, you know, not quite as mind-blowing as you might be expecting when you see that spec sheet. You'll also hear, you actually do hear the electric motors whirring a little bit. It's kind of funny just how much of that you hear. Also on this rougher road, honestly, not too much road noise at lower speeds here. You do hear some rattling and creaking though from these removable roof panels. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But anyway, we're coming to some corners here, and let's see how this 9,000 pound EV handles. All right, so it actually handles decently for what it is. Now, the only reason why is because this thing has four-wheel steering, and with that four-wheel steering, you can turn those rear wheels up to 10 degrees, and so that really helps with the handling of this thing. And because of that, it has a turning circle that's equivalent to like the average compact SUV, and it's pretty wild, and it makes it much easier to park one of these things as long as you can find a space that's big enough for it. But at least maneuvering it is, you know, pretty easy, so that's good. And so handling is actually, you know, quite good for something that's on 35-inch mud tires, that's 9,000 pounds, that's as high up as this thing is, that is not set up for any kind of backroads carving whatsoever. It handles pretty well. Now, you know, it is a little disorienting at first whenever you're using the four-wheel steer. You can turn it off, by the way, too, if you want. If you want to just have a more traditional feel, you can turn it off. I've gotten used to it pretty quickly, though. Like the first few miles, I was like, whoa, this feels kind of weird, because it almost feels like it's like the back end is like artificially like stepping out on you just because you're like turning the wheels. But as you get used to it, it really feels natural, and then just makes this a lot more friendly to just drive around, because, you know, that really masks the mass of this thing. So I actually love the four-wheel steer. I think it's great, and makes life a lot easier when you're driving one of these things. I'm not much of an off-roader, so I'm also not going to go into the off-roading stuff as much as some of the other channels out there that focus on that are much better at discussing all the off-road stuff than I am. But what I can say is, you know, the overview highlight stuff is it has locking diffs front and rear. The rear is a virtually locking diff, but has 11.9 inches of ground clearance in the terrain mode. In the extract mode, you'll have 15.9 inches of ground clearance. And so, I mean, obviously this air suspension this thing has, you can raise it or lower it for whatever your needs are. And along with that, you also have a bunch of different modes that'll help, you know, walk you through whatever kind of terrain you're facing. There's a terrain mode, but there's also a tow and haul mode to help you with that. And I love the animation that shows it towing a Saturn V rocket. It's so cool. But, you know, you also do have like the mud modes and all that kind of stuff to help you with rougher terrain. And so you also have the crab walk feature that has been highly advertised, so that, you know, allows you to kind of do a little bit of a sidestep there with the four-wheel steer, and a very cool touch if you are in the very, you know, rare situation where something like that would come in handy. It is nice to have, but I think honestly it's just a really cool party trick. Like a lot of the things in this vehicle, how many people are actually going to use a lot of these features, I don't know, but it's a cool party trick. This thing also, another party trick news, has a ton of different cameras, you know, all the usual cameras for like a 360 view, forward, rear cameras, you know, overhead, view of the bed, you know, view of the hitch, all those types of things it can do. But it also does have underbody cameras, and so the underbody cameras, you know, enable you to see what's going on underneath the front and underneath the back. So if you're trying to clear things, you know, you can have that. You also do have, you know, skid plates and all that to help you be protected whenever you're driving off-road as well. But do another acceleration here, stomping on it. It's funny though, I almost have to like adjust the steering whenever I'm driving this thing, even just to keep it going straight. It's so funny how loose the steering is, but it's definitely just, you know, keeps you on your toes a little bit. It makes this more of an adventure. You're more involved in the driving experience because you're sawing back and forth at the wheel here all the time. And, you know, it's the same kind of fun, you know, you'd see from a Wrangler as far as, you know, the handling and the steering and stuff goes. But one thing to keep in mind though is that weight. So, you know, 9,000 pound curb weight, give or take a couple hundred pounds, again, depending on how it's configured, is really, you know, a kind of weight that you have to be mindful of. You know, even if it, you know, drives great and handles great and all that, you just have to be aware of the physics of that kind of, you know, weight. And like, you know, we'll do a little bit of a quicker stop here. you know, it slows itself down, but, you know, it's not going to be super fast just because it can't be. You know, I think these things break about as quickly as any kind of 2500 series truck, or maybe even a little bit, you know, longer than that. So, I mean, long braking distances, so you just have to be mindful of that from a safety standpoint. You can't, you know, slam on the brakes and stop on a dime. You know, you gotta just make sure you're planning out your, you know, movements a little bit more, I guess you could say. And so, you know, that's just one thing of these. It's you know, it's almost so heavy that it's a little bit sketchy at times. That, you know, if you're on some kind of slippery terrain, for example, where weight is a disadvantage, things like that, you know, you're gonna have to keep that in mind, especially when you're off-road and on trails and things like that. And it does, of course, have hill descent control and all those types of things as well. And so you also do have regen here. So if you want, there's this cool little paddle on the steering wheel, and that allows you to do some more intense regen here. And it's almost like an on-demand one pedal mode where, you know, you can pull that just temporarily for whatever stop. And I kind of like that. I think it's a really cool idea. It looks a little unsymmetrical, you know, with the steering wheel design here to have only one paddle, so to speak. But it's really cool because, you know, there are certain times where I don't need, you know, tons of regen, and I don't really need a one pedal mode. I'm fine driving like a normal vehicle most of the time, but it is nice to have that if you are trying to do a little bit of extra regen for whatever reason. You can pull on that, and it gives you that, you know, right away. And so as far as other electric components are concerned, so it has a 212.7 kilowatt hour battery, and it'll do, like I said, 329 miles of range. And also it does 350 kilowatt fast charging, which is awesome as well. And I can say that whenever this vehicle was dropped off to me, I immediately had to go and charge it. And whenever I hooked it up to a 350 charger, an EVgo charger, it was able to pull, I was at like 16% battery whenever I got there. It was able to pull 310 kilowatts down, you know, like immediately, and was holding that, you know, pretty well as far as the sustained charge rate until I got up to some higher percentages there where it slowly would start to, you know, drop off and level off. And EVgo is great with how they kind of chart out, you know, your charge rates and all that stuff. But it's a pretty quick charging thing, even though it's a massive battery. And so, for example, in my experience, I sat at the charger for about 42 minutes, and I went from 16% battery to almost 80% there. And obviously, you know, that's a long time to be sitting, you know, 42 minutes. But obviously, you don't have to, you know, go that long. And, you know, a lot of that fastest charging was done in those lower percentages. So if you're okay working with, you know, the lower ranges of the battery, you can really, you know, maximize that charge rate a lot more, and, you know, probably cut down on that time without, you know, affecting the battery charge too much. And so anyway, you know, I'm just pretty impressed. I mean, that's very fast charging, and, you know, it's right towards the top of the pack out there as far as EVs here at the end of 2022. I mean, you know, like my Mach-E that I have at home currently, I mean, that does like 150 kilowatt charging in perfect conditions. So I mean, this is really nice and fast, and obviously it goes through the battery a lot faster. But 329 miles of range is a good amount of range, and again, also towards the top of the pack, you know, as far as most, you know, mainstream EVs go these days. The only thing that isn't great from an EV standpoint, though, is the efficiency of this thing. And I will be driving this vehicle for an entire week, so I'll come back and give you my final efficiency later. But what I can say right now is that over the 20 miles I've driven so far, I've been getting 1.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which is bad. You know, like for, again, reference, my Mach-E that I have does at least 3 miles per kilowatt hour, so double the efficiency of this thing. Obviously, you know, that is much lighter, much more aerodynamic, much smaller, much less powerful. So, you know, this is like you would see with any, you know, gas-powered vehicle where something with a ton of power and weight is going to get worse fuel economy, and I get, you know, 10 miles per gallon in a Ram TRX versus 20 miles per gallon in, you know, Mustang GT or something. But it's just, the fact is, it's just, you know, it's not very efficient. So, you know, it's an electric vehicle, but I mean, the way that it burns through electricity is really not economical by any means. But, you know, just part of the price you're paying for, again, all the crazy awesome stuff this thing has. And so now we're up at some slightly higher speeds here, doing about 45 miles per hour. And even on this brand new, perfectly paved road, you know, you're starting to hear some road noise for sure. That's the nature of 35-inch tires, though. So, you know, again, this goes back to, yes, the thing was expensive, but don't expect it to be luxurious. It's, again, focused on wowing you with its off-road performance, wowing you with the you know, straight line performance and all these other various things. But, you know, don't think that this is some luxurious thing, because it isn't, at least not yet. Maybe they will do more luxurious versions down the road, but as of right now, this Edition 1 is, you know, very focused on just being an intense off-roader, and so you just have to, you know, be prepared and mindful of that. All right, so now I'm out on the highway here in the Hummer EV, and I'm going hands-free because I have the Super Cruise enabled and it's functioning here, and so we're just cruising here hands-free. And this is, I love Super Cruise. It's hands down the best hands-free system out there these days. It is just so good. It's so confidence-inspiring, and it's the most advanced as well because it actually does intelligent lane changes, so it'll do an automatic lane change with no need to do any kind of turn signal or anything like that from the driver. It'll put on the turn signal automatically, but it does those passes automatically for you if it's, you know, sees that there's a chance. And I got to test this out a good bit already in the Escalade V that I recently reviewed, and it's testing it out here again in this. It's just the same great, you know, accuracy with just being perfectly in the middle of the lanes. It's also intelligent where if it sees a vehicle in, you know, the left side or on the right side or wherever, you know, it always tries to, you know, stay away from traffic a little bit. So it's intelligent about, you know, being in the right part of the lane, you know, so that you're not feeling uncomfortable hugging, you know, the middle of the lane or the left side of the lane whenever there's a massive 18-wheeler next to you, you know. And so I love the way that it positions you, and I also like that, you know, I mean, even though the steering isn't super precise here in the Hummer, and, you know, this thing is, you know, just a little more loose, it still does a great job of just being very precise and accurate with its steering. Now, the other thing you'll notice here, though, is, you know, out on the highway, 60 miles an hour here, not high highway speeds, honestly, 60 is pretty low. There's still a lot of road noise in here, so I'm raising my voice just to talk here on camera, and you know, it's just a vehicle that, you know, if you're on the highway for long periods of time, it probably won't be the most comfortable. If you're, you know, again, planning to spend 6 figures on something and you want to have Super Cruise and have a really nice highway driving experience, I'd certainly go for an Escalade. But again, this is not what this is about. Just, again, drives in the fact this is not a luxurious vehicle, but it's great to have the Super Cruise here to give you a nice, you know, bit of relaxation whenever you're out on the highway here, just having your hands resting on your lap, just watching the road ahead. It does a really good job, and even we're entering construction zone here, very tight with the guardrail and stuff, so I'm going to kind of hover my hands a little bit. And I love that Super Cruise also lets you make adjustments on your own without disengaging the system. But again, thanks to GMC here, I'll have the Hummer EV for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place, and I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world efficiency numbers, as well as my thoughts on the pricing, how it compares to its competition, and the other things you can get out there, and anything else that I noticed during my week of driving here. And we've got a nice straight bit of road here, so I'm going to try and do a Watts to Freedom launch here. So it's lowering the vehicle and lowering still. You can't do this quickly. You have to keep waiting for it to lower itself. It's lowering some more, and I think we're almost there. Okay, it says floor it, and here we go. Whoa! Wow, wheel spin! Woo! Wow! So that's that definitely feels like a 3 seconds 0 to 60 time. Woo! That was fun. Wow. Woo, yeah, it's fun to, you know, try that out to get the true potential of this thing, because that's a rush. That is a rush. Wow, it's not the fastest accelerating vehicle I've ever tested. That probably, still that crown goes to the Tesla Model S, not the Plaid, but the P100D. Sorry, my brain's a little scrambled after that. But, oh man, that was fun. Whew. Yeah, 3 seconds definitely sounds accurate, and doing it in something this enormous is a blast. And I also love how the suspension really, I mean, that front nose lifts up, because again, you're doing this launch in something with the kind of, you know, softer setup this has, and again, getting the wheel spin out of something as well. 4 wheels spinning whenever you have these, you know, 35-inch tires. It's hilarious. Ooh, sorry, it actually took my breath away. Wow. Yeah, that is impressive. That is definitely takes, you know, one of the top spots in the Matt Maran ranking of crazy accelerations that I've ever done. Alright, so I've been driving the Hummer EV here for a week now, and it's been an absolute blast to drive this thing. It is so quick and just, you know, so just gutsy in so many different ways that it just, you feel really awesome driving it, you know, is the bottom line here. Obviously, you're up super high, that adds to that feeling. And, you know, I am honestly just impressed that it is such a friendly thing to live with, because usually something this massive, you know, is just a pain to drive around, you know, a lot of the times. And obviously the width here, you know, is something you have to be mindful of. And there was a few instances where I was on either a tighter road or in, you know, close quarters where I'm, you know, kind of sweating the width a little bit. But aside from that, you know, it's very easy to drive. The four-wheel steer is my favorite thing, I think, about this vehicle, honestly, because it is an absolute lifesaver in parking lots. It is just, it makes it so much easier to maneuver. It makes this thing just feel a lot less intimidating to drive than it honestly should feel. It should feel more intimidating and harder and more difficult than it is. And the fact that they made this so accessible, so easy to drive, and that it has as good of road manners as it does, honestly, I think is the most impressive thing about this. Obviously, there are still some compromises here, you know, due to the, you know, loud tires that are enormous, but the ride is so comfortable with this air suspension, and I got used to the loose steering pretty quickly as well, so that honestly didn't bother me, you know, as, you know, a day or two went by. It was something I was already used to and, you know, had no complaints with. So the last two things I mentioned here about the Hummer EV are its efficiency numbers, or lack thereof, and also the pricing and how it compares to its competition. So first off, those efficiency numbers. So these are rated at 51 mpge in the city, 43 on the highway, and 47 combined. And if you look at any other EV, they all do much better efficiency numbers. I mean, just for reference, again, like the Mach-E that we have at my house, those are, you know, in the 80s, I believe, for the MPGe ratings, which is kind of an irrelevant number in some ways. You know, it doesn't really have any, you know, bearing on actual fuel efficiency or anything like that. But just as far as my driving here now, 164.5 miles of driving I've done. My mileage rating is 1.6 miles per kilowatt hour, which again is about half the efficiency of my Mach-E on a bad day. So, you know, again, goes with having 1,000 horsepower, having, you know, it hauling around, you know, 9,000 pounds, and terrible aerodynamics of this thing, you know, having the same, you know, aerodynamics as a condominium, you know, I mean, it's just not going to be good from an efficiency standpoint. No one expects that, so I'm not going to get into this. But, you know, it's just worth noting that, you know, it's not very efficient, and so therefore not very green with its use of electricity, even though, again, it is electric. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's, you know, economical or anything like that. That also means, you know, you have to make sure that you definitely either have a lot of fast chargers around you, because it is such a huge battery to fill. So you got to make sure you have either really the top-notch, you know, like 350 kilowatt fast chargers to fully utilize the fast charging, or make sure that you have a garage or a driveway that are plenty large enough to, you know, plug this thing in at your house. And like my average size garage, for example, couldn't fit this, so I was stuck going to fast chargers every time I needed a charge. And then the last thing to mention here is the pricing and how it compares to its competition. So first, pricing. This one asked us is $110,295 to be exact. And at 110, you know, it's insane, you know, in every single way. And so I think the price being very high also makes sense. You know, it just, you have to make sure you have the right expectations. You have to make sure that you are understanding that you are paying for the off-road performance. You're paying for the fact that it has 1,000 horsepower. And it's kind of like that performance car thing, where you're paying for the performance, you're not paying for necessarily the rest of the vehicle. You know, it doesn't feel like a $110,000 vehicle here inside, not even close in my opinion. It's cool, it's different, it's unique, but is it luxurious? No, I would say, you know, anything else you'd spend $110,000 on will probably feel more luxurious than this does. That's just the way it is. But again, I think most people buying these, they don't really care that much, and it's nice enough to not, you know, upset anybody. But it's just, you know, if you're someone who, you know, wants something luxurious, obviously you're better off getting an Escalade or something for the same price, and a fully loaded Escalade at that, you know, for 110. But if you can afford to spend about $40,000 or so more, I would recommend the Escalade V. That gives you, you know, tons of luxury, Super Cruise and all that stuff still as well. But yet you have a very capable truck. You know, those can actually, you know, tow a very impressive amount of weight as well. And you have, you know, the insane performance of a supercharged giant V8 engine. It's definitely different in its vibe than this, you know, being futuristic with the electric thing and all that, but also very impressive performer. And you have way more comfort and way more luxury, you know, much better stereo, you know, on and on, you know, more usability and things like that, obviously being 3 rows. And, you know, it's not a real good comparison, but just if you're a GM fan that wants something that's bonkers and you have, you know, plenty of money to burn, you know, I would just go for an Escalade V personally. But there's no denying this is going to get way more looks than an Escalade V, and that is one of the final things I'll say here is that, I mean, this thing got so many looks, and I wasn't even trying to attract attention. I could have, you know, done four-wheel steer or crab walk, or, you know, done any other number of crazy, you know, party tricks this thing has in order to get attention if I wanted to, but I'm not even trying to, just driving around. The amount of people that were checking this thing out, you know, obviously it's giant, and anything this big is going to get attention as well, but also the futuristic look. I think the extensive marketing campaign has also made a lot more people aware of what this is, and therefore, you know, they know about the crab walk and things like that from all the commercials, and so I think that also impresses them a little bit more because they know what they're looking at and what it can do. And so yeah, it's just awesome. I think, you know, I'm also looking forward to them coming out with lower priced versions that have less power and stuff, so that these actually can be, you know, more usable vehicles that are a little less lofty with their price points eventually, you know, so that more and more people can appreciate also just the fun enjoyment of this massive vehicle and the, you know, extreme capability it has with the off-road stuff, you know, for those who don't need a 3-second 0 to 60 time. Overall, yeah, I mean, it's clear this is one of the hottest vehicles of the 2020s so far here. It's, you know, got a super long wait list for a good reason, so it doesn't even matter, you know, what I think or what anyone else thinks, because they got these things sold out for the next few years here anyway, and they're going to sell every single one of them they can build. So I just got to say bravo to, you know, GMC for just engineering an incredible product that's just mind-blowing in every way, and really does, you know, I think shift some people's perception of what electric vehicles are and how cool they can be. I think, you know, obviously that's been a transition that's been happening obviously over the past 10 years or so with Tesla and stuff, but I think this really takes it to the next level of wow factor and really moves the ball forward in a significant way, I think, for the whole electric car movement in general. But one last acceleration here. It's so funny how it moves around so much. It's such a fun thing to run around, and I'm not a truck person either. Usually I'm like about any of the trucks I review, you know, as far as a personal standpoint of, you know, my enjoyment with them. But this, I mean, really, every single time I hopped in this thing, it was an event, it was an adventure, and it was just so much fun. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Hummer EV. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to GMC for providing me here with this Hummer EV to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.